Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. I call the meeting to order, and you will need to put the headphone on in order to hear what is going on. My name is Peter Woodward. I'm an independent moderator, and today I have the honor to, on behalf of the co-conveners of the governments of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam, to welcome you to the Ministerial Conference on Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution. The aim of the Ministerial Conference is to keep the topic of marine litter and plastic pollution high on the political agenda towards the resumed fifth session of the UN Environment Assembly in 2022, UNEA 5.2. On behalf of the conveners, I also wish to extend a sincere thank you to the UN Environment Programme, UNEP, for providing technical and logistical support to this informal process, as well as to the WTO for hosting us today and tomorrow in their magnificent premises. We are pleased, so pleased to see that so many participants are attending this meeting and see this as evidence of a very strong interest and engagement to make progress on this important topic. Indeed, we have 2 rooms occupied here at the WTO and many people joining us on site, online. So you are most welcome wherever you are located here or around the world. Without further ado, and since this is an informal process in the lead up to the resumed 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, I would like to invite the Secretary of State of Norway to speak on behalf of the UN Environment Assembly Presidency to address the meeting. State Secretary Maren Høslet Holsen, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
We do.
Sure. There is supposed to be a video from the Minister Rotevatn, I think. Is that correct?
We pause for just a moment. We just pause for a moment for a technical issue. The delights of a global summit bring their gremlins early, but I'm sure our teething problems will soon all be resolved. Just wait for a moment. So, Maren Høslet Holsen, we will come back to you in just a moment. We're just resolving a technical issue. But I would now like to invite Jean-Marie Paugam, Deputy Director General of the WTO, to address the meeting. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Moderator.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, online participants, welcome to the WTO. I should like to thank the 4 co-conveners, the governments of Germany, Ecuador, Ghana, and Vietnam, for having invited the WTO to speak here at the opening of this Ministerial Conference on marine litter and plastic pollution. We're delighted to have been able to make rooms available here at the WTO. You may be aware that this building was initially the historic headquarters of the International Labour Organization. The WTO is an economic organization, but you're here to talk about the environment. So we're bringing together all of the ingredients of sustainable development to inspire your deliberations. By providing tangible assistance to your work, we've sought to highlight just how important it is to hold a dialogue, just how important mutual support is for our trade and environment activities. Trade and the environment, these issues are often taken in isolation, in silos. So it's important to foster dialogue between our communities, trade and the environment, to tackle the main challenges we're facing together. Thus, it's great that we're here to talk about how we can promote a more sustainable circular economy of plastics. On this note, I'd like to say a few words about our take on plastics here at the World Trade Organization.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, how do we look at plastic from a WTO perspective? First thing to say, I think, is that there is a growing recognition that the way we produce, consume, and dispose of plastics causes significant damages to our environment and to our health. The accumulation of plastic pollution in the environment puts at risk the ocean and land resources that so many of our communities depend upon for their livelihoods. Therefore, several of our members have considered that moving toward a more circular and sustainable economy is essential, and that such an effort should include trade and trade in plastic as a central element. This growing recognition has already led to some initiatives and some action. Back in November last year, a group of WTO members launched an informal dialogue on plastic pollution and environmentally sustainable plastic trade, referred by its acronym IDP. And since this launch, discussion of the topic have more than quadrupled in the WTO, seeking to identify key opportunities for enhanced trade cooperation to support domestic, regional, and global efforts against plastic pollution. And participants to this dialogue are discussing multiple aspects of how trade intersects with the plastic pollution challenge, from hidden flows of trade of trade in embedded plastics to concrete trade opportunities for sustainable plastic alternatives and secondary raw materials. The second thing that I want to say is that the role that trade policy may have in fighting plastic pollution is becoming better understood. There are specific tools that trade policymakers may want to leverage to contribute to achieving global goals on plastics. This includes, for instance, lowering the trade barriers to environmental goods and services required for plastic circularity, working on the standards and regulations needed to ensure recyclability and compostability, facilitating and helping to build the capacities for more circular supply chains, and also exploring the economic drivers of a more sustainable plastic production and alternative to plastics, including the topic of harmful subsidies. The third thing which is important within the WTO perspective is that it's clear for everyone that plastic is a global challenge, and it's noteworthy to observe that so far the informal dialogue that we have has gathered the support and participation of developing, and LDC members alike, with a particular attention to small island developing states. And I think I want to emphasize this dimension. Within the WTO, the discussion on plastic can represent a bridge-building issue between developed and developing countries. Finally, you know that the cause of ocean preservation today represents the #1 priority of this organization. We are striving to conclude the negotiation on fisheries subsidies that have been mandated to us by the SDG 14.6. Of course, these are very different negotiations. They have nothing to do with plastic per se, but it goes without saying that fighting plastic pollution is also vital for ocean health, which is a purpose of our negotiations. Therefore, As our members are heading toward our 12th Ministerial Conference by the end of this year, I'm confident that the topic of plastic pollution could find its place amongst the many important subjects on our agenda. With this in mind, I'm certain that some of our interested members, and I could recognize some trade colleagues in the room, will follow closely your discussions today and your future work toward a possible international instrument on plastic. Last but maybe not least, I observe some glasses on our table, and I just want you to be aware that the WTO has eliminated all the plastics in its goblets and packaging of food in its cafeteria. So you can, without being guilty, drink water in our premises. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I would now like to invite Gustavo Rafael Manrique Miranda, Minister Transition for Ecuador, to take the floor. Minister.
Thank you.
Distinguished ministers, authorities, and state representatives, international organizations, and other relevant stakeholders throughout the world. Dear friends, on behalf of the Ecuadorian government, I would like to thank those attending physically and virtually who are participating in this first Ministerial Conference on marine litter and plastic pollution. This reflects the invaluable commitment to combat one of the main threats to sustainability of our oceans, our environment, and the life of our own planet. Plastic pollution and environmental degradation, global warming, air pollution and river and ocean pollution, and the loss of flora and fauna knows no bounds. This pressure not only has an environmental impact, but also leads to direct impacts on the benefits and economic, social, and cultural support that might be brought about. All of this comes from maritime activities, which are putting at risk all of the blue economy and sustainable development. Unfortunately, the responses and adopted measures to date, through concepts or geographic regions or through legal means, have been insufficient to date to combat and curb this scourge. And we have to adopt a focus which encompasses all of the plastic life cycle. Furthermore, the pandemic has only exacerbated the unsustainable use of plastics. Therefore, we find ourselves at a tipping point to protect the life of our planet and its biodiversity, whose excessive degradation requires all of us to work together in order to find a global response that is ambitious, effective, but above all, geared towards action. This situation has spurred us to make endeavours towards a global agreement on marine litter and plastic pollution, which addresses prevention, reduction, and looking at marine litter and looking at the different types, sources, design, manufacturing and distribution, consumption, and finally, the management of these very wastes. Furthermore, the different capacities and skills, particularly for those developing countries who are looking towards mitigating the biodiversity loss, protecting human health, tourism, global warming, and human rights. All of this needs to move towards a circular economy, one that is resilient and which is absolutely has low emissions. Ecuador is a hugely diverse country and which has fragile ecosystems which are of global importance, as for example, the Galapagos Islands, to name but one, which through its political vision of environmental transfer, we feel proud to lead in the Latin American region and Caribbean from this global headquarters, the drive that we need to move towards a global strategy, one that is coherent to combat and tackle marine litter. Thus, we will have a future with clean hands for future generations. Therefore, I urge all of you to show political will to move towards consensus, towards more ambitious targets. Together, we can therefore address the threat which is encompassing our planet. We can't just find a solution through one country or through one group of countries. However, through joint coordinated action from all member states and all socio-economic entities. This always under the auspices of cooperation and solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed as well. I would now like to invite Regina Duba, Director General at the Ministry of Environment, Nature Protection and Nuclear Safety of Germany. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, colleagues, the health of the oceans and the revenues of its legitimate uses are directly dependent on the integrity of its ecosystems. Those are under heavy pressures from pollution, the likely most prominent one being marine litter, especially plastic. The effects are not just local and direct, economic and social, they are also of global environmental scale. In the past years, Germany took a strong position against marine litter, one of the most urgent environmental problems, both at national and international level. This topic, like climate change, is transboundary in nature and can only be tackled with joint efforts. This is why it is of utmost importance to us, and also the reason why we put it on the agenda of the G7 in 2015 and the G20 in 2017 for the first time. To live up to international expectations, we set up a grand program for joint implementation projects in international hotspots. But apart from national and bilateral measures to be taken to address the life cycle of plastics, preventing waste from entering the environment, the establishment of a new global framework and treaty addressing marine plastic litter on an international level is of utmost importance to create the necessary legal framework and provide a level playing field. This kind of global problem cannot be tackled using national measures alone. It requires international cooperation and funding. Let's not forget that the environmental damage endangers the livelihood of vast parts of the society that are directly or indirectly dependent on the oceans. The damage outweighs the costs of action by far. We and our colleagues from Ecuador, Ghana and Vietnam have taken leadership to advance the issue further at the level of the United Nations. We are building upon the work and results of the ad hoc open-ended expert group on marine litter and microplastics with a view to take the next decisive step and establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee during UNEA 5.2, aiming to formalize the fruitful discussion we had the past months and years. And that is exactly what I wish us for today and for tomorrow, fruitful discussions and an ambitious outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Duba. And I know you speak on behalf of Jochen Flassbach, the State Secretary, who will be joining this conference later this afternoon. I would now like to turn to His Excellency Mr. Ramses Kelan, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Ghana to Switzerland. His Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, distinguished Chair, ambassadors, distinguished participants. Ghana extends its highest compliments to member states and all of you who have joined us at this historic meeting and conference. And indeed, needless to say, the plastic pollution and marine litter have assumed a very significant place on the global agenda. From where I come from, Ghana, we have heightened awareness of its implications for our economic development, and not least the health hazards that they have on our populations. Over the years, we've passed numerous legislation, and participated in conferences that all underline the menace posed to the environment by this menace. We need to do more than that. As we head towards UNEA 5.2 in February 2022, nations are clamoring for UNEA's mandate to establish an intergovernmental negotiation committee to spearhead deliberations that would lead to an agreement on plastic pollution and marine litter. The reason is simple. Since 2014, UNEA has adopted several resolutions concerning marine plastic pollution, all with the aim of establishing a strong global governance structure to tackle the menace and the challenge of preventing the flow of plastics from land sources into our oceans and rivers. It is now evident that these resolutions have not really slowed down the rate at which plastic pollution, marine litter continue to grow. The consequences of a lack of strong action on this issue are beyond our imagination. And indeed, today the world is standing at a crossroads in the fight against plastic pollution and marine litter. That is why Ghana and our colleague co-conveners, Ecuador, Germany, and Vietnam, have brought us together to deliberate on this menace and to come up with a loud, clear, and convincing statements. Ghana looks forward to your contributions and also to a very successful deliberation of our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to invite Kelam Nguyen, who's Deputy Director General at the Vietnam Administration of Seas and Islands, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. The floor is yours.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Good evening from Vietnam.
As you can see, we have a slight challenge connecting with Vietnam. We will persist for a moment.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I think we will move on and, if possible, come back to our colleague from Vietnam. I would now like to invite Susan Gardner, Director of Ecosystems Division of UNEP. Susan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Peter. And good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and all participants joining us from around the world. On behalf of UNEP, it's a real pleasure to join the co-conveners in welcoming everyone to this ministerial conference. At UNEP, we've been very pleased to be able to provide logistical and technical support for the organization of the conference, as well as the pre-conferences that took place in May and June at the request of the co-conveners. The level of participation has been truly outstanding, especially today, And certainly this is a reflection of the tremendous interest on this topic across the world. It's extraordinary to observe the momentum that's building for ambitious global action to, as we'd like to say, turn the tide on marine litter and plastic pollution. All over the world, we're seeing these inspiring examples of working together on this issue. And just this year alone, at the ministerial level, in February, the ministers of environment of Latin America and Caribbean called upon governments in the region and others related actors to urgently address the issue of marine litter and microplastics through a preventative whole life cycle approach. In June, the Alliance of Small Island States Ocean Day Plastic Pollution Declaration has been endorsed by over 80 governments at this point. In July, the G20 ministers called for intensification of actions to tackle sources of marine plastic litter. In August, ASEAN ministers welcomed the launch of the ASEAN Regional Action Plan for Combating Marine Debris, which provides specific policy and program recommendations to tackle marine plastic debris. And coming up in the coming months, the African Ministers' Conference on Environment will also bring this topic to their agenda. So looking across all these conversations and more, we see that to date there have been over 100 countries that have publicly called for negotiation of a new global agreement on plastic pollution. And there's been over 1,000 organizations that have communicated a common vision to go from a linear economic model to circularity with plastics. And I just want to say that from UNEP, we hear you. And we hear that you're saying that maintaining the status quo is not an option. And we hear that bold action by governments, by civil society, and by the private sector is needed at all levels. And with the recognition that addressing marine litter and plastic pollution touches on so many aspects of economy, society, and environment, we see globally conversations are continuing to advance the concept of system-wide changes. So at UNEP, we're very proud to support member states in this vision for ambitious, multilateral, multi-stakeholder action to tackle this global crisis. As we prepare for the resumed UNEA 5 discussions in February, we walk with you on this journey, and with enthusiasm, we continue to support the activities that bring governments and other stakeholders together to address this critical global issue. Thank you.
Susan, we thank you very much indeed for your commitment here and to your speech. I would now like to invite His Excellency Peter Thompson, UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean. Peter Thompson, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed, greetings all, and thank you to the organizers for giving me the privilege of addressing you, especially in the company of such a distinguished raft of speakers. Before addressing the subject of this conference, I believe it is important that all of us acknowledge the context of our times, in particular the state of the planet and therein the state of the ocean's health. The recent release of the IPCC Climate Change 2021 report has caused the UN Secretary General to describe its findings as a red alert for humanity, doubling down on his early warning that humanity has been at war with nature. Perhaps the most graphic example today of our war on nature is plastic pollution. We can take it that our presence here today signifies our concern regarding the scourge of plastic pollution that we've unleashed upon our environment. From the ocean's deepest trenches to the planet's icy poles, from the plastic detritus lining our coasts to the giant gyres of plastic soup endlessly circulating out there in the middle of the ocean's great basins, our plastic pollution has permeated the natural world. At the current rate, by the year 2050, there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Shame on us. But ladies and gentlemen, today we're setting out on a correction of our errant ways. The problem has been identified and amplified. Now solutions are being sought, and part of them must be a robust international treaty that brings an end to marine plastic pollution. Ladies and gentlemen, in offering my profoundest thanks, I say to Vietnam, Ghana, Germany, and Ecuador that this is what international leadership looks like in the multilateral world in which we live today. From the four corners of the world, your four countries have stood up and done what it takes to convene this ministerial conference. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I can feel progress in the air. I foresee a welcome launch in Nairobi in 6 months' time. I see nations seizing upon this opportunity to make peace with nature, bring an end to the plague of marine plastic pollution, working hard to restore our relationship with nature to the correct respect and balance wherein it should lie. In the light of the circumstances we find ourselves in today, I have 2 words of advice. Be bold. You will face powerful headwinds as you chart this course to our rightful destination. But as Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. I wish you well in your deliberations today and tomorrow, and will be summarizing the outcomes of this conference in a speech that I will be giving on plastic pollution next Monday in Marseille at the IUCN World Conservation Congress. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that presentation. And I would now like to invite Marcos Orellana, who is UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Marcos, Elena, the floor is yours. I understand that Marcos Orellana is not online at the moment, but I'm going to return to Vietnam on this global odyssey. So I would like to invite Kay Lam, who's Deputy Director General of the Vietnam Resources Environment, when the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening from Vietnam. Excellencies, honorable ministers, ambassadors, distinguished delegates. Plastic pollution and marine litter is an urgent global crisis, threatening worldwide ecosystem, environment quality, and habitats of humans and wildlife. Up to 12 million tons of plastic waste end up in our ocean every year. This reality demands the world to join hands urgently to address this serious challenge before it is too late. Vietnam is honored to co-convene the Ministerial Conference on Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution, together with Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, with the support of United Nations Environment Program. I extend sincere greetings to all delegates who are attending the conference in person and online, along with my sincere thanks to governments, organizations, and partners to attend and sponsor organization on this important event. Excellencies, recognizing the importance of addressing marine plastic pollution, the government of Vietnam pays special attention to solutions and policies and laws on environmental protection by practical actions such as passing the law on environmental protection 2020, legislating contents on plastic waste management, reuse, recycling, treatment, and development of circular economy model of plastics, issuing the National Action Plan on Marine Plastic Litter Management to 2030, strengthening awareness, raising activities on consumption and disposal of plastic products, promoting scientific research, innovation and technology transfer, and establishing public-private partnership mechanism address plastic pollution. In the spirit of Vietnam, a responsible member of the United Nations, continuing to affirm political commitment to development of global agreement on marine plastic pollution on the basis of respecting international law within the framework of the UN for a blue ocean, a green planet, peace, stability, and prosperity. This June, Vietnam joined 78 UN member states and the European Union to endorse the Ocean State Plastic Pollution Declaration, calling for the establishment of an intergovernmental negotiation committee at the UNEA 5.2 to start negotiations for a legally binding global agreement on plastic pollution. On this occasion, I call on the conference participants to focus on solutions to mobilize countries' participation in addressing plastic pollution and marine litter, models of sustainable product and consumption of plastic products, and decisive next steps, including co-sponsorship for draft UNEA 5.2 resolution on the establishment of an intergovernmental negotiating committee. I would also appreciate your support for the draft ministerial statement on of the conference. I hope the conference will achieve participant results, contribute to building momentum and political will to promote the coherent global strategy to end plastic pollution and marine litter, ensure a clean ocean future. Lastly, I would like to thank the effective coordination of the co-conveners, Ecuador, Germany, and Ghana, along with the technical and financial support from UNEP and the GIZ for Vietnam and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in the process of preparing for this important conference. Sincerely, thank you.
Thank you very much. And despite the interference, we hear a very powerful commitment and message from Vietnam. So thank you very much. I believe that Rolf Peetz, Executive Secretary of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Secretariat is in the room. So if you are Rolf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, please allow me to express my utmost gratitude to the governments of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for convening this Ministerial Conference on marine litter and plastic pollution, and for inviting me to address this forum on behalf of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. This Ministerial Conference truly comes at a critical moment, as our planet is facing a triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and indeed pollution. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated not only our dependence on plastics, but the challenges we face in ensuring the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. Yet, as we look ahead for answers, there are already excellent initiatives to build upon. For example, the Plastic Waste Amendment in 2019 and the Plastic Waste Partnership under the Basel Convention, which is now in full swing. Thanks to the generous financial support of our donors, dozens of countries around the world are being supported in their efforts to develop institutional, technical, and legal capacities to tackle the plastic waste crisis. For example, in Ghana, as part of a project funded by the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, the government of Ghana is taking action to address plastic waste at all stages of its life cycle. Jointly with our partners, we have been developing recommendations for the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, training custom authorities, and initiating pilot activities to tackle plastic waste at the source. We have also successfully piloted a scheme for the collection of waste fishing nets, which would otherwise have been dumped on the beaches or in the ocean. The Basel Convention Plastic Waste Partnership also provides a forum for civil society, academia, and the private sector to work hand in hand with countries to address plastic waste as a source of land pollution and marine plastic litter. No less relevant is the Stockholm Convention, which controls various persistent organic pollutants, which are also found in some types of plastics, such as certain flame retardants and plasticizers. Currently, further additives are under review by the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee under the Stockholm Convention. The Basel and Stockholm Convention regional centers have also taken initiatives to study the challenges and measures to tackle marine litter, plastics and microplastics, and their POPs and EDC components, and are currently implementing a series of projects on plastics waste under the Basel and Stockholm Convention's Regional Center Small Grants Program, or the SGP. Last but not least, the Rotterdam Convention also plays an important role in promoting shared responsibility and open exchange of information on trade of certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides, which of course remain relevant to the plastics discussion. Taken together, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions constitute key pieces of the puzzle that needs to be put together, hand in hand with other mutually supportive multilateral processes and fora relevant to addressing planetary plastics pollution, in order for us to coherently and successfully tackle this plastic pollution emergency effectively and also at the global level. This will require vision and courage, and I know from my experience under these three conventions that this is readily at hand. I call on all to seize this critical moment, and as countries call for an international treaty on plastics, let us together show that leadership at the highest levels and in all sectors can indeed reverse those worrying trends. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, with these few words, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. With that, we've received some significant and powerful opening statements from key players driving this agenda forward. So thank you very much. This is a conference for all of us. We have 2 rooms full and also people online. And I'd just like to provide some housekeeping information to help guide your involvement through the 2 days. Just to remind that a guidance note was issued for participants ahead of the meeting. If in appropriate places you'd like to request the floor under agenda items 3B, 4, 5, 7, and 8. If you are in person, you should raise your nameplate vertically. If you are an online participant, just press the green raise hand button. Please note the delegates from governments and regional groups will be given priority to take the floor. Interventions for these discussions will be limited to 2 minutes, and we kindly request participants to speak at a moderate pace to facilitate simultaneous interpretation. Please note that in the interest of time and fairness, and on behalf of everyone at the conference, the co-conveners and particularly myself will be firm in observing the time allocated for your intervention. I hope you will make my task an easy one. Documentation pertinent to the meeting was made available to participants ahead of the meeting and can be accessed through the meeting webpage. I specifically would draw your attention to the availability of the draft ministerial statement on the Ministerial Conference website. Let us now turn our attention to the meeting's agenda as contained in the documentation circulated and also reflected, I believe, on the screen. As you can see, today's discussions will be focused on agenda item 2, update of recent progress on the issue of marine litter and plastic pollution, and item 3, summary of the outcomes of the Ministerial Conference pre-meetings that were held 27th and 28th of May, 28th and 29th of June 2021, and the reflections of the draft ministerial statement. Tomorrow we will open the meeting at 10 o'clock CET, and we plan to continue discussions under item 3, sub-item B, general reflections on the draft ministerial statement, followed by agenda item 4, outlining steps in the lead up to the resumed 5th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, UNEA 5.2. We will break between 12 and 1 o'clock CET, after which we will reconvene to address agenda item 5, the high-level dialogue, followed by agenda item 6, co-convener summary, agenda item 7, update on relevant processes, and agenda item 8, any other matters related to the conference. The Ministerial Conference is scheduled to close at 1600 CET, and we will all sit down and have a small glass of something in an exhausted state, but hopefully with a positive disposition. So that is the process. I think we have just been able to make connection back to one of our initial speakers, so I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that we will be able to hear from the UN Special Rapporteur, Marcos Orellana, UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Marcos, are you with us?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I wish to first congratulate and express my sincere gratitude to Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for their leadership in convening this timely ministerial conference, and for inviting me to address the conference in my capacity as United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Over the past few years, numerous scientific and other studies have revealed the magnitude of the plastics threat. The evidence on the volumes of plastics production and on the toxic additives in them is clear and overwhelming. Overcoming the plastics crisis will require coordinated and concerted international action. The complexity of plastics is not unlike other problems the international community has confronted. Among others, it involves issues of biodiversity, technology, and trade. But plastics also has serious impacts on people and their rights. There are impacts on human rights in every stage of the plastic cycle, including, for example, toxic pollution released in the manufacturing process of plastics, exposure to toxic additives in consumer products, and certainly waste mismanagement. Human rights principles are thus critical to legitimate and effective outcomes. In that regard, the Paris Agreement on climate change can be informative. After a contentious negotiation, the Paris Agreement explicitly speaks to the importance of human rights in climate action. This is because, among other things, informed public participation leads to stronger policies and effective implementation. Human rights principles can similarly inform the transition towards a chemically safe circular economy. For example, extended producer responsibility arrangements that apply principles of prevention and polluter pays are key to addressing environmental injustices that arise in international trade of plastics. I also wish to highlight the importance of assessment of alternatives to avoid misleading or false solutions. For example, at current levels of technology, plastic production and toxic additives in plastics, less than 10% of plastic wastes are recycled. Recycling is thus currently more of a mirage that creates an optical illusion. Similarly, open burning and incineration generate toxic dioxins and other persistent organic pollutants that are extremely harmful to human health and the environment. To conclude, Mr. Moderator, I will submit that a human rights-based approach is critical to an effective and legitimate legally binding global instrument to tackle the global plastics crisis. Effective so that solutions can actually solve the problem. Legitimate so that solutions do not come at the expense of those most vulnerable in society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for your intervention. So we will now turn to agenda item 2, which is the update of recent progress on the issue of marine litter and plastic pollution. And we'll focus only on global and regional updates under this agenda item. And under this, I'd like to start by inviting Letitia Cavallo from UNEP to provide updates on previous UNEA resolutions and resulting actions. Letitia.
Thank you very much, Peter. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear participants. Marine litter and plastic pollution at UNEA are embraced comprehensively. UNEA 1 requested a state of knowledge report on the topic. UNEA 2 requested a state of governance report. UNEA 3 agreed to the vision of zero leakage and provided a mandate for an expert group on marine litter and microplastics. UNEA 4 renewed the mandate of the expert group and stressed the importance to strengthen the scientific and technical knowledge on these topics. At every United Nations Environment Assembly, since the first one in 2014, governments have adopted resolutions directly addressing the issue of marine litter and microplastics, as well as various other resolutions linked to it, such as sound management of waste and sustainable consumption and production. It also shows that the discussion on the UNEA lens has evolved from effects on marine ecosystems to more focus on the source of the problem and highlighting the need for facilitation of national and regional action plans, phasing out avoidable plastic products, sharing of scientific knowledge, design standards. UNEP also serves as the Secretariat of the Global Partnership on Marine Litter and other initiatives. It has continued to grow with these partnerships over the years and now counts over the 400 members from more than 70 countries. UNEP has developed and contributed to a range of knowledge products, including those listed on the screen. Apologies, I'm seeing you cannot see on the screen. My slides are not running, but I'm sure that we will share this with you later. And there are several more to come. This knowledge is used to support action plan development at regional and national level and to support member states to make progress. UNEP has been proudly championing the Clean Scenes campaign since 2017, with the aim of connecting and rallying individuals, civil society groups, industry, and governments for catalyzing change on the subject of marine litter and plastic pollution. It has since become the world's largest campaign of its kind, with 63 countries on board, covering over 60% of the world's coastline, and over 111,000 pledges received from individuals, showing tremendous momentum from civil society. Operating as one UN, UNEP collaborates with several UN entities that are doing relevant work on the topic of marine litter and plastic pollution. For example, we work closely with FAO and IMO as part of the Global Partnership on Marine Litter. I hope you can hear from some of those agencies as well from today. FAO addresses plastic litter originating from the agriculture and fishery sectors and microplastics impacts on seafood quality. For example, UN Habitat on identifying and quantifying certain sources of marine litter, namely from waste management systems in cities. We have already heard about the relevance of the WTO and our join hands to support this conference and host this conference is an example of this partnership. WHO has focused on environmental exposure to microplastics, with the publication of a report on microplastics in drinking water, for example. As we've heard from the Secretariat of Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, we support parties in addressing plastic waste, including through these conventions, in particular Basel Convention Plastic Waste Amendments, that enhance the control of transboundary movements of plastic waste and clarify the scope of the conventions as it applies to the same. UNEP also has a strong collaboration with the JEF on the issues of marine litter through regions and national projects. In sum, as we are here and we hear from you and we work with you supporting your national and regional efforts, we believe the UN family can continue to play an important role in supporting the ongoing efforts by member states to take urgent and decisive action on marine litter and plastic pollution. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed for that intervention. Just mention one thing, one or two technical challenges we're facing, and just to mention that the conference homepage is not working on the WTO Wi-Fi currently, but this is in the process of being solved. Also, just to mention, I was going to join colleagues in room S1 this afternoon, but the switch of plan. We hope you're connected, but I'm staying here this afternoon and will be in room S1 tomorrow morning before returning here later. That's in the spirit of engaging everyone fully in the process, but we hope you are in any event. I would now like to invite Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Chile. Sorry, there we are. His Excellency Alexandra Guerra, and the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Portugal, His Excellency Luisa Fragoso, co-chairs of the Nairobi Group of Friends to Combat Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution, to give us an update. So if you would like to address the meeting, please.
Good afternoon to all. Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the floor as Chile's ambassador to Kenya and PR to UNEP here in Nairobi. I want to thank you for the invitation to address this forum with my colleague, the PR of Portugal, regarding the creation of the Nairobi Group of Friends to Combat Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution, which is co-chaired by Chile and Portugal and was virtually launched from UNEP headquarters the 6th of July. Let me extend my sincere congratulations to the government of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for jointly convening this Ministerial Conference of Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution in an hybrid format which allows inclusivity and a broad participation of multi-stakeholders. As you well know, marine litter and plastic pollution is a worldwide and transboundary problem that we must face together in order to agree on a sustainable and permanent solution. Addressing a comprehensive approach to reduce plastic pollution by focusing on preventive upstream actions dealing with the entire life cycle of plastic, promoting circularity and taking care of this matter at a global level is vital. The overuse of single-use plastic is especially troublesome, I had a technical problem here. Okay. As you well know, marine litter and plastic pollution is a worldwide and transboundary problem that we must face together in order to agree on a sustainable and permanent solution. By focusing on preventive upstream actions dealing with the entire life cycle of plastic, promoting circularity and taking care of this matter at the global level is vital. The overuse of single-use plastic is especially troublesome, having led to a global environmental catastrophe which has worsened these last 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We must face the problem regarding the plastic litter and pollution on our oceans and ecosystems. This cannot be postponed anymore. Therefore, I strongly believe that the incoming UNEA 5.2 represents a great opportunity to take a decisive step at the multilateral level in a fight against this global challenge. And this Ministerial Conference takes into account precisely the momentum and the urgency of the matter with concrete solutions and proposals. We are so pleased that there are several initiatives ongoing worldwide to face marine litter and plastic pollution, but without doubt, the Ministerial Conference is one of the most important and meaningful. Therefore, as one of the co-chairs of the Nairobi Group of Friends, I pledge our full support to this conference and its outcome. We are working together to the same goal, and we must encourage the synergies and linkage between the different processes and discussions, with the aim of having ambitious results at UNEA 5.2 here at the South Headquarters of the United Nations. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for your intervention. And I'd now like to hear from Walton Webson from the New York Group of Friends to Combat Marine Plastic Pollution. Walton, I believe you are live online.
May I understand that I'm on next?
You are now online, yes, and live.
From Nairobi, still. I believe that the connection remains with us. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
So I believe that the subtitle refers to the Ambassador Walton Webson and Silva Barbuda. I'm Luisa Fragoso, co-chair of the group of friends in Nairobi, co-chair with Ambassador Alexandra Guerra. And just to finalize our intervention, I would also like to join my colleague and dear friend, Ambassador Guerra, in commending the co-conveners of this Ministerial Conference for the initiative and in thanking them for the kind invitation extended to the permanent missions of Portugal and Chile to UNEP as co-chairs of the Nairobi Group of Friends to combat marine litter and plastic pollution to address this meeting today. Indeed, we are all aware of the various risks and challenges presented by the increasing amounts of marine litter, microplastics, and plastic pollution. In this context, and with the goal of ensuring coherent, strong, and ambitious action on marine litter and plastic pollution, at the resumed session of UNEA 5, Portugal and Chile launched the Nairobi Group of Friends, an informal and inclusive platform in Nairobi for all interested members and observer states and relevant stakeholders. We are pleased to note that by now the membership of the group currently consists of 31 member states and more than 21 stakeholders organizations, this being from last July when the group was launched. In the months ahead, the Nairobi Group of Friends will undertake a series of activities to help share and disseminate information, galvanize support for the development and consideration of an effective global governance framework, and advocate for coordinated solutions that address the problem holistically through a life cycle approach. To kickstart the activities, it is my great pleasure to announce the first meeting of the Nairobi and New York Group of Friends. This will take place on the 9th of September. More information to member states will be available soon. This will set the stage for what we will seek to do, respectively, in Nairobi and New York during the upcoming months. 2022 must be a year of action in the fight against marine litter and plastic pollution. It is our goal that the Nairobi Group of Friends can work as a platform to promote this goal. I thank you for the opportunity to join me today and wish you fruitful discussions and ambitious outcomes. Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed, Walton Webson. And in my enthusiasm to drive forward the agenda at pace, I inadvertently forgot to introduce from the Nairobi Group of Friends, the permanent representative of Portugal, Luisa Fragoso, who's one of the co-chairs of the Nairobi Group of Friends. So, Luisa, my humble apologies, and hopefully you are still live online and would join us now.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much. Excellencies, colleagues, good day from New York. This is Ambassador Walton Webson from Antigua and Barbuda. Excellencies, colleagues, on behalf of the chairs, the co-chairs of the New York-based group of Friends to Combat Marine Plastic Pollution, Maldives, Norway, and my own country, Antigua and Barbuda, we would like to thank the co-conveners of this Ministerial Conference on Marine Litter and plastic pollution. We'd like to thank our colleagues from Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for the invitation to participate in this conference today. We are grateful, colleagues, to have participated in this process as we collectively work towards a global vision on addressing the marine litter and plastic pollution problem. This global problem is only getting worse. And the call for action are only increasing and getting louder. Annual losses to an estimate of about 500 billion or 2.5 trillion are seen in coastal and maritime industries, such as fisheries, tourism, and shipping. While we have a lot of international law that touches this issue, it has not been effective in slowing down this problem. This illustrates, my friends, why the push to address this issue through a new global agreement through the United Nations and why it is increasing, and it is incredibly important for us to do so. We view this conference and the preparatory process as a significant vehicle for advancing dialogue towards a shared vision on the best approaches to address this problem. Since 2020, the New York Group of Friends has been working towards action that would help us to address the plastic pollution problem at the global level, comprehensively and effectively. With 55 member states and some 7 non-governmental organization stakeholders, we have focused on increasing awareness on current gaps in the global legal and policy framework and the scope of the potential solutions to the plastic pollution problem. And we have been promoting this amongst the New York-based diplomats. As just announced by our friends in Nairobi, we will be hosting a joint group meeting in the coming weeks to provide feedback on the ongoing efforts and shared information on the way forward. We hope that this process and its outcome today and tomorrow can take us closer to our shared objectives to address the marine litter and the plastic pollution challenges. And we together would work to address this at the meeting to which I just made reference. Friends, we pledge our continued support in working together to address this global problem. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Walter Webster, thank you very much indeed. Forgive my confusion over introductions, but what is very, very clear is there are some very powerful, passionate groups, the Nairobi Group of Friends and the New York Group of Friends, with a real drive and commitment to this agenda. So we thank you all. We would now like to hear recent updates from a number of other programs very relevant to this agenda from the IDP, CMS, and SPREP. So first of all, I think I would like to go to Rhys Pogonowski from the IDP.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests and representatives, firstly, let me thank you for the opportunity to provide a short briefing on some of the efforts underway at the World Trade Organization to address plastics pollution on behalf of the co-sponsors of the Informal Dialogue of Plastics Pollution and Sustainable Development, also known as the IDP. As Deputy Director General Pogam introduced before, China and Fiji launched the IDP in November 2020, and since November, the dialogue has gained a considerable amount of interest, and there are already currently 17 co-sponsors, including, perhaps unsurprisingly, many of the members in this room, including those leading this conference, such as Ecuador, Vietnam, and host city or host country Switzerland as well as co-sponsors. And notably, the current group of co-sponsors includes a diverse group of WTO members, including developed, developing, and least developed countries, and includes representation from South and North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania, showing that this is a problem that the WTO recognizes is truly global. A focus of the IDP, or the focus really, is on the trade-related elements that contribute to plastics pollution, recognizing that global trade is a significant factor in the life cycle of plastics and plastics supply chain. As DDG Pogam just said, trade must play a part of this solution, and we cannot afford to remain siloed as international policy communities if we are to solve this problem. At its outset, the IDP recognized that it would be necessary to undertake a multi-stakeholder and inclusive approach to address plastics pollution. Oceans management, pollution, and sustainability matters are complex, and expertise and responsibility is shared amongst a number of arms of the international community. And so, meetings of the IDP have welcomed participation from a broad range of the environmental community, and discussions have drawn heavily on the expertise from organizations such as UNEP, the World Customs Organizations, UNCTAD, and the Basel Convention. The IDP is committed to contributing solutions to the trade-related elements of plastics pollution that is complementary to and builds on the work of the international environmental community. And across 2020 and 2021, the IDP has held a series of informal dialogues on a number of issues, including the hidden trade flows of plastics, sustainable trade in plastics and plastics alternative, how we could improve transparency on domestic and regional policy and gather greater data on plastics flows, how we could promote best practices and strengthen policy coherence and find collective solutions, and how we can collectively support developing and least developed country solutions as well. Co-sponsors are currently discussing draft elements for a statement at the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference, which will be held later this year. The statement would create a forward work program to guide our efforts to address plastics pollution at the WTO. We have begun extensive outreach to other WTO members and would welcome, of course, greater participation from members of this body and members of the WTO in the initiative. Thank you very much, and I'd like to take this opportunity finally to wish you all the best for the remainder of your ministerial conference.
Thank you very much, Rhys, and I now move to the IMO and Frederick Haag.
Mr. Moderator, I hope you can hear me. Excellent. Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is an honor for me to make this brief statement on behalf of the International Maritime Organization, IMO, and also as one of the co-chairs of the Global Partnership on Marine Litter Steering Committee. As the UN Specialized Agency for Shipping, IMO has pioneered regulatory developments regarding marine litter for over 30 years, in particular through the prohibition of the discharge and disposal of plastics into the sea from ships under MARPOL Annex 5 and under the 1972 London Convention, and 1996 London Protocol. Despite this, IMO member states have acknowledged that more can and should be done, and in 2018, IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee adopted the IMO Action Plan to address marine plastic litter from ships, to strengthen and support the implementation of IMO's regulations. London Convention and Protocol parties are also supporting the action plan through enhancing their work on marine litter. In this context, I would like to highlight the work of GESAMP, which, through several of its working groups, have provided IMO and the rest of the UN system with a better understanding of the issue from our specific perspectives. And in the weeks ahead, GESAMP's working group number 43 will be releasing its report on sea-based sources of marine litter, providing a detailed overview of the current state of knowledge, supporting further work of FAO, IMO, and the rest of the UN system. Noting that the issue of marine plastic litter, and in particular the solutions for addressing it, often go beyond IMO's immediate and core mandate, IMO has developed a major global technical cooperation and assistance project together with FAO and with funding from the government of Norway, the Glow Litter Partnerships Project. This project is building a capacity to implement relevant IMO and FAO instruments in 5 regions and 30 countries around the world. Several strategic partners play a crucial role in this project, including UNEP and the UN Global Compact. Finally, allow me just to reiterate that IMO remains committed to the work to address marine litter and microplastics from sea-based sources at global, regional, and national levels, strengthening our work on these matters and working closely with our UN partners bilaterally as well as through cooperative mechanisms such as the GPML and GESAMP. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Frederick. And I now turn to Amy Frankel from the CMS, the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Amy, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
It's good.
Excellent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, work on plastic pollution has largely focused on the marine environment, including under the Convention on Migratory Species. Last year, the 13th CMS Conference of the Parties called for a focus on other species protected under CMS, namely migratory, terrestrial, and freshwater species. We were pleased to join UNEP in the larger Countermeasure 2 project focusing on the Asia-Pacific region, funded generously by the government of Japan. Yesterday, we released the CMS report, and I'm happy to share 3 of its key findings. First, plastic pollution is clearly impacting land and freshwater species protected by the Convention on Migratory Species. Second, migratory species are likely to be among the most vulnerable to plastic pollution. For instance, discarded fishing gear is posing a key threat to the survival of the Ganges River dolphin and the Irrawaddy dolphin in the Mekong River, and plastic is causing deaths of dugong in river deltas. Many CMS bird species are being impacted by plastic pollution, and while there is insufficient research on the impacts of terrestrial animals such as the Asian elephant, the report found that plastic ingestion is likely to be adversely impacting a wide variety of land animals. Third, the long-term implications of plastic pollution for organisms, ecosystems, the food web, and human health are still not known and must be a research priority. Yet global capacity to manage plastic pollution is not keeping pace with projected growth in the plastics market. In closing, the focus has thus far been on cleanup in our oceans, but that is already too late in the process to address plastic pollution on land, in our rivers, and in our oceans. We need to focus on solutions and prevention of plastic pollution further upstream. We at CMS greatly look forward to collaborating on this urgent global issue, and thank you very much for including us in the program.
Amy, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the very important work that you do. Our 4th little acronym SPREP in this section, the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. I'm delighted to give the platform to Cozy Latu to speak to us.
Pacific Island countries make a tiny contribution to global plastic pollution, but our region is grossly and disproportionately affected by it. The highest recorded density of floating plastics is in the South Pacific subtropical gyre. As Pacific people, the ocean is the foundation of our cultures, our livelihoods, and identities. Our health and prosperity relies on the health of our ocean, and support for a global treaty in our region is strong and growing. The vast majority of members of the Pacific Regional Environment Program support a global instrument to tackle plastic pollution. As stewards of vast marine territories, we are at the front line of this problem, and we see its effects every day. We understand that we have obligations towards our ocean, which supports and sustains us, and these responsibilities do not stop at national borders. The work of Pacific Island countries and our region as a whole is guided by the Cleaner Pacific 2025 strategy, and from this year, our 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. Importantly, this 2050 strategy will prioritize ocean
We hope we can remake the connection.
Pacific Island countries make a tiny contribution to global plastic pollution, and we see its effects every day.
Okay, I think we've lost the end, but hopefully we got a powerful gist of some of the work and the commitment that is taking place through SPREP. What this session is really revealing is just a number of programs and activities that are taking place across the globe, really powering in on this particular agenda. And I'd like to now invite Carsten Wachholz from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to briefly introduce the next invitation. Carsten.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Perfect. Ministers, Excellencies, delegates, participants, on behalf of WWF and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, would like to thank the organizers of this conference for the opportunity to highlight the wide spectrum of support from both the industry, the finance sector, and civil society for a new UN plastics treaty, supporting the transition to a circular economy. Over the last couple of years, our organizations worked with many of the world's leading consumer goods companies who are placing plastic packaging on the market to align on a comprehensive circular economy approach. To support these efforts, we developed together with the Boston Consulting Group the business case for a new UN Treaty on Plastic Pollution, a report which was published in October 2020. Based on this report, we see an ever-growing number of organizations and companies that are now calling on UN member states to commit to the development of a global treaty on plastic pollution. For today's conference, we have gathered 4 testimonials from these group of supporters, and I hope that the video can be played now.
Plastics from the economy that we don't need. And for the plastics that we do need, we need to ensure that they can be reused, recycled, or composted. And we need to collect and circulate the plastics that we use to keep them in the economy and out of the natural environment. Today, through voluntary agreements like the Global Commitment and the Plastics Pact Network, we've already seen more than 1,000 leading organizations from across the plastics value chain come together and make significant strides towards the creation of a circular economy for plastics. But voluntary agreements alone are not enough. we need an international binding approach to amplify the efforts of these leading organisations who are committed to delivering better solutions and to level the playing field for all companies to ensure that they are doing their part. A comprehensive global framework will strengthen policy coordination and collaboration, going well beyond the exchange of information and best practices we have today. By setting out global goals and legally binding instruments, together with national action plans and consistent measurement, a UN treaty will significantly accelerate existing initiatives and also stimulate new ones. Recognising the urgency of this situation, a group of 78 companies from across the plastics value chain and the financial services sector with civil society have signed a business manifesto calling on governments to commence international negotiations. Let's now hear from two of these signatories on why they support a new UN treaty to address plastics pollution.
Around the world, governments, civil society, businesses, academia, and individual citizens are mobilizing to try and shift to a much more circular economy. Unilever has made a range of commitments, including halving our use of virgin plastic, and that we will collect and process as much plastic as we use. There's a lot that we can do, but collective action is key to delivering our commitments. Only collaboration across sectors, across national boundaries, and across time can generate the impact that's needed. A shared roadmap will accelerate this action. That's exactly why Unilever is a strong supporter of a UN plastics treaty. A meaningful, well-designed and binding treaty that tackles virgin plastic production, transforms the reuse of plastic, creates certainty for investment in infrastructure, and drives transparency. A UN plastics treaty can help transform our relationship with this important material.
Fidelity International supports the call for a UN treaty based on circular economy principles, including both upstream and downstream measures to tackle plastic pollution. A treaty is the obvious next step.
I cross my fingers again that we reconnect in just a moment.
We need to eliminate the plastics from the economy that we don't need.
So unfortunately, I think we cannot complete that video, but again, I think we get some clear messages coming from the business world around the whole drive towards circular economy and the elimination of single-use plastics. So thank you very much for those contributions. If we can bring the video later, we will certainly try to do that. What I'd like to do finally in this section is invite Jacob Dewar from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste to offer us a final contribution. So over to you, Jacob.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Excellencies. On behalf of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, I would like to express my sincere thanks for the opportunity to address the Ministerial Conference. As a global non-profit organization, our mission is to help ending plastic waste in the environment and contribute to a circular economy. Our projects on the ground in over 60 cities worldwide have shown one thing: plastic waste is a challenge that needs to be addressed both globally and locally. We need commitment today, and it needs to be backed by urgent action and solutions that can be scaled for impact. With much at stake, global cooperation is critical to effect real change. Governments, the private sector, and communities must work together towards the shared goal of ending plastic waste in the environment. This ranges from developing infrastructure in communities that do not have access to waste management services, to establishing a pipeline of innovation to unlock more solutions to advance the circular economy. Equally important is educating and engaging individuals to be part of the solution. While we need to stop the future leakage, we also need to remove the waste that already sits in the environment through cleanups. These are the 4 pillars the Alliance ascribes to create change. Our projects demonstrate that in developing countries, universal waste management can be economically viable while environmentally and socially sustainable. We are working across regions to develop, deploy, and scale solutions designed to treat plastic waste as a resource that should be harnessed. We take on early development risks and provide funding to accelerate solutions. The Alliance stands ready to contribute to international efforts to address plastic pollution, also in the area of plastic waste data and monitoring. We are in advanced discussions with UNEP on how our plastics recovery insight and steering model can support the GPML digital platform, providing the necessary data to support governments. We are committed to harmonizing data and methodologies to generate consistent and comparable insights. As an innovative financing model, we believe that we can contribute to the wide set of solutions needed to address marine litter and plastic pollution effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Jacob. So there are some updates on a whole range of work streams taking place across the globe, and we hope that both gives a clear indication of the level of work and activity going on, and also the commitment to drive forward and some significant levels of ambition for this process. Time is always the challenge in a conference like this because there are so many interventions, which is important because there are so many players who are active in driving the agenda forward. But it does mean that rather than having an opportunity to go and have some fresh air or whatever, we're going to drive straight on. I'd like to just say hello to the delegates sitting in S1. I wish I was with you for a while, but I would be fascinated just to have a wave coming from the other room, just to know that there is life in the below. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I will not invite the online community to do that as well, but just I'm sure you're understanding that these are really important interventions that are adding to that general thrust towards UNEA 5.2. What I'd like to do is to continue straight on and move to item 3. And that's the summary of outcomes of the Ministerial Conference pre-meetings, which were held on the 27th, 28th of May and the 28th and 29th of June. What I'd like to do is to look at those in a little bit more detail, and we've got some updates from a number of key people. So we'll begin by discussing sub-theme A, which is the presentation of key takeaway messages from the 5 thematic work streams, for which I'd like to recall that 2 pre-meetings were held, and these thematic work streams were: 1, common goal, vision and objectives of a potential global instrument; 2, data monitoring and reporting; 3, measures to address marine litter and plastic pollution, including through a life cycle approach and dialogue with industry and consumers; 4, national and regional cooperation, coordination and implementation; and 5, financial and technical support. The co-facilitators of the work streams will provide us with an overview of key messages from the pre-meetings, and if I could invite them to be as short as possible, because I also am very keen, as we get to 3B, to give all participants in this conference the opportunity to contribute. But I will now invite co-facilitators from Workstream 1, that's Pernilla Arlin from Sweden and Ayub Macharia from Kenya, to take the floor on common goal, vision and objectives of a potential global instrument. Pernilla and Ayub, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Woodward. Dear Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm very honored to be here today. As you may have seen, an informal summary of the two preparatory meetings for this Ministerial Conference was shared prior to this meeting. Dr. Macaria and I had the pleasure of co-facilitating the discussion of thematic workstream 1, Common Goal, Vision and Objectives of a Potential Global Instrument. This discussion helped to frame what is envisioned in terms of an ambitious goal or vision to address the root causes of marine litter and plastic pollution. The discussion included the need to establish a global instrument agreement to prevent and reduce marine litter and plastic pollution, which should complement, coordinate, and strengthen efforts. The global instrument agreement needs to be based on sound science and to foster science-based decision-making. The need for assistance to developing countries to ensure adequate implementation. Participants also discussed what they consider would be the key common vision and/or goal of a potential global instrument. Many participants mentioned the need to have a goal or a vision based on circularity and addressing the full life cycle of plastics. Further, the precautionary approach, the polluter pays principle, extended producer responsibility, common but differentiated responsibilities, among others, were mentioned as basis for the common vision goals. The alignment of the goal of vision with the 2030 agenda is important. The vision includes the reduction of additional marine litter and plastic pollution to zero by 2050. The human rights dimension should be addressed. I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Macaria to summarize the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pernilla. In addition, participants also discussed what would be the scope of a potential global instrument. Many participants mentioned the need for the potential instrument to go beyond marine litter and incorporate more general aspects of plastic pollution. Additional views on scope included focus on upstream measures, address both land-based and sea-based sources, including microplastics, recognize the global transborder nature of the problem, implement limits for problematic plastics, including bans on single-use plastic products and plastics with toxic additives. Further, foster behavioral changes, innovation, and promote green jobs. Facilitate the sharing of information and good practices among parties. Include urgent short-term solutions to improve waste management, especially in developing countries. Finally, participants discussed what should be the outcome of the second part of the 5th session of the Environment Assembly. Many countries consider that an intergovernmental negotiating committee should be established with a mandate to develop the global instrument or agreement promoting broader participation of stakeholders. It was also mentioned that the potential decision could include an acknowledgement that plastics is not adequately addressed by other agreements, and the urgent need to address plastic pollution for the environment and society, including their health and human rights aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So that is that work stream number 1. I now invite the co-facilitators from work stream 2 on data monitoring and reporting, Nanette Laura from Seychelles and Vladimir Lenev from Russia. Starting with Nanette, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Excellencies, friends and colleagues. Good evening. Vladimir and myself had the privilege to facilitate discussion of thematic workstream 2, data monitoring and reporting. Two of the most talked about issues relating to marine litter and plastic pollution are data monitoring and reporting. Eventually, in order to be able to measure the success and progress of any global instrument, data and reporting are vital as they will lead to the achievement of the vision, goals, and objectives as discussed in thematic workstream 1. During the pre-meeting in June, participants had to provide comments on 4 questions. What type of data and monitoring will be useful under potential global instruments on marine litter and plastic pollution? What would a global monitoring system look like, building on existing and potential data flows? What kind of reporting would be useful to measure the progress of a potential global instrument? And what is a desired outcome for the second part of the 5th session of the UNEA? Generally, several points were raised by those who provided comments, recommendations. Those were also proposed during the discussion. It has been emphasized that there is a need to have harmonized and standardized methodologies for monitoring and reporting. This will allow for comparisons to be made and in the end produce a better decision-making which is supposed to be scientific. One of the most important points put forward is the fact that the least developed countries, not forgetting the small island states, need to be assisted throughout the process. Assistance can come in the form of technical, financial, and of course, capacity building. There is a need for those countries to be supported in the area of technology transfer as well. Data remains relevant in every aspect. Therefore, there is a need to have data on the following: microplastics, litter flows from both land and sea-based sources, transboundary movement of plastic pollution. Data is also important to know the impacts of plastic pollution on human health, and of course, data on species and species ecosystems. It was also proposed that there is a need for a global monitoring system to be introduced and be implemented. Such system is expected to help in making better informed policy decisions. This system will also help in the monitoring of plastic throughout its life cycle and the impacts on the environment. I have the pleasure to now invite Vladimir to summarize our intervention. Thank you.
I'm hoping that Vladimir will join us. Vladimir Lenev, are you with us? I think we may not have Vladimir with us, unfortunately. So I think in the interests...
Mr. Moderator?
He's now here. Nanette, go ahead.
I can summarize his part if he's not able to connect.
Please do.
Microplastics, litter flows from both land and sea-based sources, transboundary movement of plastic pollution are all important. Our oceans are sick with plastic waste. It is obvious for all those who time to time go to the seaside beaches. Very often nowadays, the color of the sand is not traditionally yellow, but a blue pinkish in many places because of the microplastic particles in it. I am not saying about waste like plastic bags, empty bottles, slippers, and alike. That has not been yet transformed into microplastic. That's what we see, but that's only a head of the needle. The real level of the pollution is not visible and covered by deep ocean waters. To realize and assess a true level of the ocean plastic sickness, a universal system of global scientifically proven data collection and monitoring has to be established. Only when the right diagnosis and the volume of damage is established, the right treatment could be prescribed, and the process has to be closely monitored through reporting. Only following this path, we have a chance to treat our oceans from menace of plastic pollution. One more important thing, there are much more chances to overcome sickness when treatment is started as the earliest as possible. We don't have a luxury of time to be spent in vain. We have to act urgently and do whatever we can to establish an intergovernmental committee to negotiate new universal environmental treaty to protect our common assets. Global ocean plastic pollution at the upcoming 5th UNEA session. In conclusion, we would like to once again thank all those who have actively participated in the thematic session on data monitoring and reporting. As a result of it now, we have a better understanding of the important building block of the future agreement. We would also like to thank the organizers of our conference. We believe that we have a lot to achieve and to reach our common goal, thus creating a universal global system for the protection of the oceans from plastic pollution. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much to you, Nanette, and sorry we couldn't have Vladimir live with us. I now invite Asha Challenger, Antigua and Barbuda, one of the facilitators from Workstream 3 on measures to address marine litter and plastic pollution, including through a life cycle approach and dialogue with industry and consumers. On Workstream 3, Asha, the floor is yours. And please, if you can ensure your video is on. Yes, it is.
Good. Good day, Mr. Moderator, Excellencies, colleagues. I have the honor to present on behalf of my co-facilitator, Hugo Shelby from the European Union, a bit of the summary of the discussion on thematic workstream number 3, and that was measures to address marine litter and plastic pollution, including through a life cycle approach and dialogue with industry and consumers. This discussion took place on 20th of May earlier this year. So as a general overview, the discussions focused on the measures that could be taken to address marine litter and plastic pollution and to prevent leakage through regulatory, market, and other approaches, considering how the approaches could be used in a new global agreement or instrument. General elements discussed included outcomes of the work and the ad hoc open-ended expert group on marine litter and microplastics, including the options identified for measures at the national, regional, and international level, the need for a deepened understanding of the life cycle approach and its utility in the context of a call for science-based measures within that approach, which was supported by many participants. An emphasis on tailored measures, considering the current social, economic, and environmental circumstances in each country, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. An emphasis on the need for capacity building, technology transfer, and financial support for developing countries. The need for a global instrument to broadly enable national action, including through support for the development of national action plans with input from and consideration of the needs of indigenous peoples and local communities, and the need for a broad multi-stakeholder approach in the negotiation and implementation of the potential agreement. Regarding the question of what types of measures should be considered for this potential agreement, for this potential global instrument, the discussions focused around that efforts are required across the entire life cycle of plastics, including both upstream and downstream measures. National and regional action plans could be an important tool for countries to implement keeping in mind, however, that the plastics economy is global. Waste management, local and regional legislation, and national action plans to address the leakage of plastics into the environment should be strengthened and included in the global agreement. Regarding the role of stakeholders, including government, industry, and civil society, there was a general view that a multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approach is required across all levels of government, and that industry organizations, the scientific community, academia, and all sectors of civil society, including youth, need to be engaged. Adequate consultation and the participation of all stakeholders will be fundamentally important for enabling effective work towards a global agreement. And to finalize, what is the desired outcome of the second part of the 5th session of UNEA? Many participants said that the desired outcome of this meeting was the establishment of an INC to prepare the text of an instrument agreement in time for the 6th session of the Environment Assembly. And that's a general summary of our discussions, and as discussed earlier, a fuller summary has been provided to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Asha, thank you very much, and it sounds as though you've had some very productive discussions in that work stream. So I'm now going to turn to work stream 4 on national and regional cooperation, coordination and implementation. And I believe we have Lark Williams of the United States and Augustin Hart from Argentina. So Lark, first, the floor is yours.
Thank you, distinguished delegates and colleagues and the conveners for creating this opportunity. Some of the elements described under this item include the need for a possible global instrument that promotes complementary action at all levels, both local, regional, and global, the need for national and regional action plans to create a coherent and effective framework that promotes cooperation and coordination, and that countries can come together to work under a shared global vision. And that a global instrument should strengthen actions that are happening at the national and regional level. Further, a global instrument agreement could encourage countries to strengthen these national actions and set potential goals towards addressing the full life cycle of plastics. And these could be, also delegates noted that national action plans could be included as an obligation under a potential instrument. There was also the reference to the need of financial and technical assistance that would need to be developed and implemented to support national action plans and to support implementation of a potential global framework. Further, delegates highlighted the need for a global instrument or agreement to fill in gaps that are not addressed by existing initiatives at various levels of governments, including national, regional, and global levels. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague who also co-chaired. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Continuing with the discussions discussed around the national and regional cooperation, coordination and implementation, the delegates highlighted the need to feed into and collaborate with environmental agendas which are pertinent, such as biological diversity and climate change, and further, the need to support existing initiatives, agreements, and conventions such as the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, the conventions and the regional action plans, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, the International Maritime Organization Action Plan in order to tackle marine litter from ships, and the G20 implementation framework for marine litter action plans, amongst others, in order to ensure complementarity and not duplication of efforts. Moreover, participants emphasised the importance of developing national plans in collaboration with all pertinent entities, such as industry, the scientific and academic sector, civil society organisations, and the citizens themselves. These plans should be geared towards setting out incentives to promote a circular economy to foster new and more effective ways of waste management, ensuring that plastics are more recyclable, and to help and to capture the value from these plastic production recycling products. Furthermore, it was stressed the need to develop new and better technologies in order to address plastic waste, including chemical recycling and reducing the incineration of this said waste. In addition, participants reiterated their support towards a global instrument. Some participants specified that this should be legally binding. However, others articulated a blend of voluntary and binding provisions, and this would be the ideal for some. Furthermore, some participants supported the setting out of an intergovernmental negotiating committee at the resumed session of UNEA 5.2 in order to commence the crafting of this global instrument. To conclude, during these discussions of this work stream, important elements were presented which can be taken into account in order to strengthen future negotiations and to develop national, regional, global actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those interventions. And finally, I now invite the co-facilitators from Workstream 5 on financial and technical support. So we have Julius Piercy from the United Kingdom and Cheryl Rita Cow from Malaysia. Starting with you, Julius, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Cheryl Rita and I had the pleasure to co-facilitate thematic workstream 5 on financial and technical support. Participants discussed what financial support should be considered under a potential new global instrument. For developing countries, in particular least developed countries and small island developing states, financial support is crucial to tackle plastic pollution effectively. Many participants said that a possible global instrument should include a funding mechanism to allow them to fulfill requirements under such an agreement. Examples included a global fund as part of an existing mechanism, such as the Global Environment Facility, or a new dedicated fund. Several participants raised the importance of cooperation between existing programs and initiatives to avoid duplication and identify synergies. Some of the initiatives that were mentioned were those of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, regional seas programs or conventions, the Global Plastic Action Partnership, and the Global Partnership on Marine Litter Digital Platform. Several participants mentioned the need to explore innovative financial mechanisms, engaging not only traditional donors, but also harnessing private sector financing. This could promote rapid progress if investments are scaled up and de-risked, but it was important to ensure that investments did not have adverse environmental or health outcomes. Extended producer responsibility was emphasized by many participants as a way to ensure financial support from the private sector. Some participants also raised the importance of mobilizing finance to key sectors and parts of society, such as informal waste collectors. If an intergovernmental negotiating committee were created at the resumed 5th session of the Environment Assembly, it could consider how to ensure predictable and stable funding that is distributed according to need and impact, taking into account a gender approach. I'll now hand over to my co-facilitator, Cheryl Rita Cole.
Thank you very much, Julius. I hope I'm audible. I now have the pleasure to share with you some of the key takeaways on technical support under thematic workstream 5. Participants discussed on the way for a possible global instrument or agreement to include technical support for developing countries and small island development states to ensure effective implementation. Participants emphasized on the need for a dedicated scientific group to provide scientific and socio-economic advice to countries and to support technology and resource transfer. The scientific body should aim to gather economic and market knowledge, develop standards and guidelines to measure progress, and provide guidance for specific sectors at various scales, including small and medium-sized enterprises, and conduct initial scoping and establish inventories, review legal and policy frameworks to identify gaps and ensure compliance with new communities. Participants called for a global instrument or agreement which entails the function to facilitate data sharing and harmonization and promote synergies and best practices, as well as technical support for the establishment of targets and goals. On waste management, participants highlighted the need to engage with informal waste collectors in developing countries to move towards the formalization of their work and provide them with better working conditions. Small island states with limited land establish waste management facilities would require support to ensure the feasibility of recycling projects. It was also highlighted that a global instrument or agreement should ensure that significant upstream and preventative action was taken to reduce waste generation. The instrument should encourage countries to reduce the amount of plastic materials used and adopt sustainable low-carbon technologies, and should provide guidance for the development and implementation of sustainability criteria for plastic products. A global instrument or agreement should provide guidance and technical assistance for the formulation of action plans and for the measurement of progress and reporting through harmonized approaches. If an intergovernmental negotiating committee were created at the resumed fifth session of the Environment Assembly, it should ensure that elements such as technology transfer and capacity building are incorporated into the agreement. Thank you very much for your attention. With that, I pass the floor back to you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that concludes feedback from the 5 work streams, and it's absolutely clear there's some important and quite ambitious work taking place within those work streams. So thank you all very much for that. We're now going to move to item 3, which is, and 3B, which is reflections on the draft ministerial statement. And this is our final item for this afternoon. And this is an item which allows you the opportunity to make direct interventions as well. And just to remind you, we're just going to just have a brief summary about the aim and the content of the ministerial statement. And then I'm going to give the floor to anyone who would like to make a maximum of 2-minute intervention. And I'm going to be very tough on this because there's nearly 1,000 people connected into this conference, and we want to hear as many interventions as possible. So if you've drafted a 5-minute speech, you've got about 3 minutes to cut it down to 2. And I only cut short in the interests that this is we are looking for as many interventions as possible related to the ministerial statement. So with your permission, I will be quite tough on that 2-minute rule. So please, if you can adjust your thoughts in terms of an intervention, I think that would be very helpful and appreciated by us all. So what I'd first like to do is give the floor to Oliver Boachi from Ghana to just present on the ministerial statement, the background to it, and give an overview of the feedback so far received. So Oliver, if you are with us, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. On behalf of my co-conveners, Ecuador, Vietnam, Germany, and of course, Ghana, I am very pleased to introduce to you briefly the draft ministerial statement, which is supposed to be the outcome of this conference. So let's start with the purpose of the ministerial statement. I'm not going to belabor the point of why we need an agreement, because that has been articulated very eloquently in the course of this conference. But we are going to UNEA to ask for a mandate to craft a global agreement. UNEA is going to ask who says we need such an agreement. The ministerial statement is the document that is going to show why we need a global agreement and the kind of support that the world has given to this desire to come up with a global agreement. So what are the contents of this statement? Basically, when we decided as co-conveners to organize this conference, we had two pre-meetings, one in May, that's May 27th and 28th, and then one in June, June 28th and 29th. And based on the outcome of those two pre-meetings, the co-conveners came up with a set of key messages, which in the end came out to be the pillars on which the ministerial statement is based. Now, the draft key messages were shared on 23rd of July so that we can begin to solicit input from member states and also from key stakeholders. The deadline for those comments on the draft was August 27th. Now, the comment process was made as participatory and transparent as possible in order to show the range of views to be expected. Several revisions of this statement has been issued, and I am very, very happy to say that as co-conveners, we believe that we have produced a document that captures most, if not all, of the essential sentiments of member states and the major stakeholders. It is still open for deliberations during this conference. It needs the signatures of member states as endorsements to demonstrate to UNEA 5.2 that the world is clamoring for a global agreement. And so during these 2 days, we want to encourage you to endorse this document with your signatures. After the conference, we still have some time up to the middle of October, I believe, for us to continue to append our signatures to demonstrate our support for this global agreement. It won't be over after October 15th. Of course, the statement will have come to its end, but that will be the input to UNEA 5.2, and we want you to continue to support us beyond UNEA 5.2 so that we can come up with an agreement that the whole world sees as valuable and will help us to address the menace of plastic pollution and marine litter. And at this point, I think we are going to open up, and it's your turn now to tell us what you feel about the statement and how we can improve it to make it the best as we go towards UNEA 5.2. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver. So what I would now like to do is to invite you, if you would like to contribute, either by putting your card live vertically or indicating online. And I have got a number of people here who are helping to select in priority order some people to make contributions. If I can repeat with the best diplomatic smile I am able to, we have a 2-minute rule now, and when at the end of 2 minutes, I will say time, please, and that's my politest way of saying stop. So if you can support me in understanding that, that would be very kind of you. I recognize that we all could speak for many hours on this hot topic. So what I'm going to do is go straight in, and first of all, and again, it's comments on the content of the ministerial statement, or maybe your conviction about that ministerial statement and potentially your support or whatever. So we really want to hear some voices related to that statement and that process. So first of all, I would like to invite the European Commission to speak.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, Excellencies, dear colleagues. I would like to offer comments on behalf of the European Union and its member states, and of course start by thanking the co-conveners for hosting this meeting and the UNEP for supporting the process. Now, the EU and its member states, we are strongly concerned with the significant leakage of plastics into the global environment. This impacts ecosystems and biodiversity, people and their health. The problems are very much caused by unsustainable patterns of consumption and production, as well as the transboundary nature of plastic value chains. Now, given the complexity of the problem and the need to act urgently, the EU and its member states call for a global response on plastics. And what we need is a legally binding global agreement to combat marine litter and all kinds of plastic pollution, ensuring continuous innovation and addressing plastics through a life cycle approach and by promoting a global circular economy. The agreement should promote action at all levels, but at the same time make sure that all countries have the right tools and flexibility to implement international policies according to national specific circumstances. To be effective, the agreement should approach the problem from the upstream part of the plastics life cycle and go beyond waste management, addressing prevention of leakage, as well as resource efficiency and long-term circular use of plastic products. Duplication of efforts should be avoided, and therefore the agreement should build on existing work, and full advantage should be taken of the existing and new technical as well as scientific knowledge that is being acquired. Now, we are calling for involvement and coordination of efforts by all stakeholders. Also, in order to achieve a circular plastics economy, it is important to incentivize industry to take responsibility for the whole life cycle of plastics and plastic products. The agreement should identify actions, standards, and measurable goals that support the transition to a circular economy, as well as enable effective monitoring of marine litter and all types of plastic pollution and their impacts that would allow for the optimization of measures both at the national and regional levels. So in conclusion, dear colleagues, there really is no time to waste. We are convinced that we must act globally now to tackle the global challenge of marine litter and all kinds of plastic pollution. And we, and that is the EU and its member states, therefore support the key messages of the ministerial statement drafted by the co-conveners. And we believe that the first step to act is by establishing an intergovernmental negotiating committee at UNEA 5.2. And of course, I would like to say that we remain at your disposal to engage constructively with all of you throughout the next 2 days to make sure that this conference really concludes with a strong statement and brings us a step forward towards the establishment of the INC at UNEA 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Important message. If I can also push a further message to pull us back to the 2-minute rule, but I appreciate the first on, that's a little more of a challenge. So Switzerland, if you have a history of watchers, so hopefully you will be able to maintain our 2-minute role. Over to Switzerland.
Thank you, moderator, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank UNEP and the convening countries organizing this meeting. Let me also say that Switzerland is delighted to welcome you here in Geneva. Marine litter and plastic pollution are issues of major global concerns. The challenge they pose requires comprehensive and coordinated action. Engagement of all sectors is needed. It is therefore more than symbolic that we meet here in Geneva in the premises of the WTO next to the WHO, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, UNEP's Chemicals Branch, and the Secretariat of the Basel Convention. All these actors present here in Geneva have to contribute to this challenge. The proposed statement clearly frames the situation. No country can adequately address the various aspects of the challenges posed by global plastic pollution alone. Therefore, we need a robust framework for international cooperation and coordination. All countries bear the responsibility to tackle this issue, even a landlocked country as Switzerland. A comprehensive life cycle approach is needed. I am convinced that this approach will have to combine various measures, local and global measures, voluntary and legally binding. And in order to stimulate, promote, and ensure that these measures are taken, we need a legally binding international agreement. From our point of view, the following important elements are at the heart of the proposed ministerial statement. The necessity for a global agreement.
Time, please.
And our commitment to work towards launching at UNEA 5.2 a process to develop a legally binding framework. I am optimistic that with these key messages of the ministerial statement, we can give not only a strong signal of our commitment to fight plastic pollution, but also make a first stop towards solving this global challenge. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I now move to Colombia.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is an honour to take the floor on behalf of the Colombian government in order to refer to the draft ministerial statement proposed by the governments of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana and Vietnam, to whom we would like to express our gratitude and for having invited us to this conference. I'd like to make reference to priorities for Colombia. Our comments have been sent electronically. Colombia would like to emphasize that we do understand the importance of the negative impacts of marine litter and plastic pollution, as well as the importance to remember that plastic impacts affect all of the ecosystem. And we urge, once again, to go towards actions and consensus to address these issues across the whole ecosystem, especially marine and coastal ecosystems. Colombia feels key messages towards robust financial mechanisms which are accessible to all, to ensure that all states have access to implementation measures which are necessary in order to comply with the commitments of this instrument. And this is a priority. If not, it would be very difficult to reach an effective solution at a global level to address plastic pollution in our oceans. To end, I'd also like to refer to the need to make reference to the elimination of plastic pollution, which is going to be supported by measurable time-effective indicators in line with countries' capacities. This will allow us to ensure that the instrument has solutions which can be effectively achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colombia. And I now turn online to the Philippines, and it will take a moment to connect there. And good if you can have the video on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. The Philippines supports the adoption of the ministerial statement. We strongly agree with the need for a global agreement to address marine plastic pollution and set the global direction for action, creating systematic and lasting solutions. The unprecedented rates of plastic pollution and consumption have contributed to the accelerated degradation of resources, most especially to the marine environment. The issue of marine litter and plastic pollution is a global transboundary crisis which requires collective, ambitious, and concrete actions. Thus, the Philippines stresses the need for a legally binding agreement. For it to be effective, it must be guided by science, adopt the precautionary principle, include a long-term cross-sectoral and holistic approach, and have a system for measurement and monitoring, a financial mechanism, and an intergovernmental scientific body. The global agreement should also be interpreted and applied in a manner that does not undermine relevant legal instruments, frameworks, and global, regional, sub-regional, and sectoral bodies. A dedicated scientific body should be mandated to assess and track the extent of the problem, develop a scientific methodology with common global standards for measurement and data gathering, and provide baselines for monitoring progress and inputs for decision-making at the global level. We submit that the proposed agreement should push for developed countries' responsibility to extend technical and financial support to developing countries in its implementation, in line with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development's core principle of leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Philippines, and I now turn to Liberia. And if there's any possibility, if you have heard something said, we're looking very much for new insights, but I leave it with you. So I turn now to Liberia.
From the end of Liberia, I like to say we recognize the need to take swift action against marine litter and plastic pollution. But specifically, we like to urge member states, especially developing countries, that we need to take bigger action because, like one of the speakers said, vulnerable countries are already facing the brunt of what is happening. So we want bigger action that are above voice, and those actions must be cohesive on the decision-making table. And I'm glad we are at the World Trade Center where trade and negotiations are made. The ocean and that of the environment and trade, they got a meeting point. Everything that happens in the trade environment, they end up in the environment. So in the end, what we want to say is that a bigger country must do more. I heard about the polluter pay principles. Many a time we talk about it, but we do not see it practical. That's just our perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that intervention. And I now turn to Belize, please.
To the conveners of this conference. Just to reiterate again from the point of Liberia, like small island developing states, we are vulnerable to the impacts of marine litter pollution. Belize is a country heavily dependent on its natural resources, particularly its tourism and its fisheries sector. Recent assessments in our country found that there are microplastics in our marine environment, particularly in species that are part of our export industry. We nationally have made efforts to reduce dependence on this pollution, on these pollutants, and we've implemented legislation that helps to address importation, manufacture, sale, and possession of these products. And so we also call on nations to join in terms of action to support the multilateral global agreement on plastic pollution. As that said, we endorse the ministerial statement and we affirm our commitment to this multilateral global agreement. We advance that the action must be collaborative, that the action must be coordinated, it must be data-driven, it must take on a long-term social ecological approach, and it must be underlined by a precautionary principle. Belize will continue to be a leader in the Caribbean and Central American subregions on environmental initiatives such as this one. We do advance also that there needs to be support for financing, capacity building, technology transfer, and building out the appropriate MRV systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I now turn to Brazil, please.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil would like to congratulate the co-conveners for organizing this Ministerial Conference. Brazil considers plastic pollution a critical environmental challenge, which requires an international response. Therefore, we are committed to contributing to this debate and appreciate the initiative to discuss a draft declaration on the matter. Brazil also deems essential that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities be included in the declaration as part of the guiding principles to reduce marine plastic waste. As an internationally recognized principle, it has been adopting several multilateral agreements to help promote a sustainable future that considers the different responsibilities of developed and developing countries. Cognizant of the negative impact of plastic pollution, Brazil agrees with the negotiation of a global agreement based on a clear and common vision. In order to ensure progressive elimination of discharge of plastic into the environment, it is paramount that the declaration includes references to mechanisms for technical and financial assistance and facilitated technological transfer to developing countries. It is also key to include different targets for different countries in compliance with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Lastly, Brazil looks forward to engage in this regard in Nairobi as the CPR prepares the substantive outcomes of UNEA 5.2. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I now turn to Norway and Maren Høsles Holsen. I feel I should give you more than 2 minutes, but I leave it with you, Maren, after our problem earlier this morning. We're coming from online, so it takes a moment or two. I think we will come back to Norway. It is becoming a theme of the conference. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sure we will come back to you, but I'm just very aware of time. So could I turn to Burkina Faso?
Merci bien.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Burkina Faso, I wish to thank the convening countries and Norway and Switzerland who have been assisting us. Regarding plastic pollution, this is an issue for Burkina Faso. By way of example, in 2017, we had 13,000 tons of plastic waste, which increased in 2020 to 49,000 tons of plastic waste. This waste is displacing towns towards the country. We don't have pollution in the cities, but in the country as well, in our fields and forests. This is why the topic here is very important: marine litter and plastic waste. The fear that we have now, and for which we put forward this position regarding the ministerial statement, we just would ask if there is a possibility to recalibrate the conclusions. While marine litter is very important, we must keep in mind the consequences not only for oceans, but for the land and the countryside. This is something we need to focus on. We just need to recalibrate this, take into account the various aspects, and we need to consider the consequences inland where there are also victims of this plastic waste, just as is true for the oceans. That is the proposal that we wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And all these comments are being noted carefully, and the co-convening group will be reflecting on them overnight. I'd like to now turn to Indonesia, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Indonesia would like to express a sincere appreciation to co-conveners for organizing this ministerial conference in the midst of significant uncertainty. Like many other countries, Indonesia faces increasingly problematic marine litter and plastic pollution, which cause unprecedented effects on human health and the environment. The plastic crisis is complex and transboundary. Therefore, addressing enormous scale and impact of plastic problems require us to move beyond the status quo and business as usual approaches and pursue more robust global efforts. Indonesia appreciates work carried out in pre-meeting, which, among others, resulted in draft ministerial statement suggesting the start of negotiation on a new global agreement on marine litter and plastic pollution. Allow me to reiterate key inputs of our written comments that have been submitted just a few days ago. We need a new framework of cooperation to enhance our collective measures. In that regard, Indonesia suggests 5 points to improve and strengthen draft ministerial statement so that it could lead us to a better and more robust dialogue on global agreement. First of all, Indonesia offers the EU arrangement for capacity building and assistance should become a key pillar of a new global agreement. We must realize that one significant factor contributing to vast amount of plastic pollution is the enormous capacity gap in environmentally sound waste management between developing and developed countries. And despite plastic waste amendment to the Basel Convention, which has entered into force since beginning of this year, Indonesia continuously receives illegal importation of plastic waste beyond our recycling and incinerating capacity. Therefore, capacity building, technical and financial assistance should not just be considered, quote unquote, as written in paragraph 7 of the draft. Instead, the ministerial statement should be at the front of advocating adequate and sustained capacity building arrangement for developing countries in a new global agreement on plastic. Secondly, similar to other multilateral environmental agreements,
I'm afraid time is short, so just headlines, please, if you can.
Agreement should recognize the principle of common but differentiated. And the third point is that we support the development of common methods and standards, and we would like to emphasize that consistent and commonly accepted plastic data and metrics should become key scientific. And last but not least, acknowledging the fact that despite environmental impact, so that also they deliver socioeconomic advantage and the need to help ensure smooth and inclusive transition towards a plastic-less society. So we expect these 5 points to be included in the new version of the ministerial statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've received your message loud and clear. And now I would like to turn to Sri Lanka and remind again the 2-minute rule, please. So over to Sri Lanka, also online. No Sri Lanka, so I think we will continue with Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm making these reflections on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. Might crave your indulgence for a half a minute or so more as I'm producing my reflection in Braille, and it might be a little bit slow. Mr. Chairman, I want to make 4 points. First, we hope that this ministerial engagement leads to concrete action in the short term. Second, it is clear to me and to us, my team, that we need a new global agreement to confront the scourge of marine plastic pollution. The current regime of existing treaties, while important, is just not working. We also believe we can tinker because around the edges of these things, because that too does not work. Equally clear to us is that we must be innovative. Like climate change, the causes of plastic pollution comes from a multitude of economic activity. We must therefore include all actors. We must have non-state actors, and we believe that in the negotiations, non-state actors should be involved in its implementation and discussion. Third, we must effectively deal with the very real capacity and financial challenges of developing countries to control waste, clean up existing pollution, and implement the provisions of a new agreement. We must remember that most SIDS, small island states, and LDCs have very little experience and or capacity to implement the type of life cycle regulations that has been discussed in the pre-ministerial to date. The text in the outcome document concerning finance and capacity building is weak and woefully inadequate. We must address this. My final point is the process to develop this new global agreement must be inclusive. Our task, Mr. Chairman, in the coming months is to come together to build consensus, not on the whole agreement, but rather on the mandate to start negotiations. In our discussion so far, it is obvious that some states are far in advance of where we're going in order to have substantive discussions. Others are lagging behind. But every state needs to be in a place to have these discussions to achieve an agreement in that reflects the concerns and interests of all of us. For this reason, Mr. Chair, we think that the UNEA mandate should be ambitious, but it should not be prescriptive of the content and the outcome that we want. We hope that the fruitful discussions over the next 2 days and over the months ahead will be ambitious and will lead us, and we assure you that SIDS will continue to push, and we hope you will work with us as we push for an ambitious agreement. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Messages received loud and clear, so thank you for that. I'm going to do third time lucky. I'm going to try for Norway. Maren Hesteth Holsen, we will have a glass of lager after this conference at some point when we meet. But Norway, are you with us again? I fear the answer is no. So I'm going to continue. Just to say we're going to continue this afternoon through till 5:10, if that's okay, because we started a little late and we've had a few technical difficulties. There will also be a possibility for interventions first thing tomorrow morning as well. But I'm now going to move on, hopefully, to Uruguay. Are you with us? problem with the sound.
Can you hear me now?
I can now, yes.
At the outset, I would like to thank the co-conveners for having organised this ministerial conference, and also to Switzerland for hosting this face-to-face meeting. Uruguay understands the importance of having common global actions which involve public policies, as well as substantive changes in social behaviour and cultural behaviour. It is critical to build consensus on current challenges and to have a focus based on humans in order to eliminate plastic pollution. From our viewpoint, currently there is a legal basis in the international arena which could be encompassed with an international legally agreement, which would like to, that is what we'd like to add to this current ministerial conference. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And I now turn also online to Japan.
Can you hear me?
It's good.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I highly appreciate all effort by conveners and the Secretariat. Many important points were included in the ministerial statement, and Japan would like to raise some points. At first, measures on marine plus litter, which have already been implemented by many countries, should be based on the local and the national circumstances, not be uniformly regulated. Secondly, the whole life cycle approach should be applied rather than focusing on one side. And thirdly, implementation of practical measures using existing frameworks should be continued in parallel to the discussion on a global instrument. Last but not least, it is crucial that wide participation, including large emitting and consuming countries of plastics, could join in global discussion in order to proceed with the practical measures globally. Therefore, we would like to request one modification at the last part of the paragraph 7. We would like to replace ambitious goals and the means of implementation with wider participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. Message received. And I turn now to Malaysia.
I hope I can be heard loud and clear.
Do you have your video on as well?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, Malaysia would like to thank the government of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for the tremendous effort in preparing the revised draft of ministerial statement. We are happy to see that this has now transformed into a more objective way forward as reflected in the draft. Nevertheless, this is only the beginning of the harder process. Well, as they say, the devil lies in the detail. On this note, we would like to bring to attention 4 important points from the revised draft. Firstly, there is a need for clear definition as well as clarification on the proposed indicators as mentioned in paragraph 4. Indicators that relate to plastic pollution varies from carbon emission, air quality, water quality, and all the way through to ecosystem vitality. Indicators must be well defined as these indicators are interdependent with other parameters beyond plastic per se. Secondly, the effort in reducing virgin plastic production must be complemented with a clear substitute or alternative framework. This alternative should be looked through the whole value chain, as alternatives require specific manufacturing as well as disposal facilities. Thirdly, we strongly support the effort of providing sufficient, predictable, and adequate means of implementation as stipulated in paragraph 4D. We would like to suggest a multilateral implementation trust fund be established, replicating the same as established under Montreal Protocol. Lastly, the issue of monitoring and evaluation mechanism, as mentioned in paragraph 4E, indicates across-the-board elimination of plastic discharge. On this matter, we would like to suggest a phased approach elimination framework based on material-specific characteristics, taking into account capacity of country as well as technical assistance required. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that intervention. I'm now going to come to Qatar.
First, I would like to express my thanks and gratitude for everyone to their efforts to reach this stage in the matter of marine and plastic waste. My observation is in 2 points. The first one is in the first point of the statement regarding the commitment and accountability. We propose to reformalization of this paragraph to be inconsistent with the original convention, such as the Convention of Climate Change and Ozone Protocol. And the second point, which says that whoever pollutes pays for the pollution, we disagree of pollute in general, and it is necessary to inclusion a correct mechanism or mention it in the statement to be understandable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention, and I now move to Ethiopia, please.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to thank the government of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for advancing the issue of plastic pollution and marine litter to the UN attention and organizing this ministerial and UNEP for technical and financial support, important ministerial meeting. We recognize and appreciate the work that has been done by a group and urge the globe for global response to overcome the challenge. Like many countries, we feel that a global response as global agreement, it is needed to enable the success of national initiatives and address the gaps and fragmentations that currently exist at the regional and international levels. We have tried to limit the amount of plastic goes to waste through limiting the thickness and encouraging plastic recycling process. However, this has fallen short as plastic pollution continues to be a significant problem in our region due to the transboundary nature of the problem and the solution. Such a global agreement should include shared vision, reduction target, national action plans, monitoring and reporting, implementation, support and establishment of scientific bodies with a mandate to assess and track the extent of the problem and collect state-of-the-art knowledge to provide input to inform priorities, decision-making and implementation. As usual, Ethiopia will be committed to the realization to reach the global agreement to combat the plastic pollution. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Ethiopia. I'm aware that we are almost at the end of our time for this afternoon. Our plan is that for the first session tomorrow morning, there will be an opportunity for further interventions. So if you're on the list and we've seen you, we have you in mind, and we'll very much aim to bring people in tomorrow morning. The plan is that overnight we will be reflecting on some of and all of the comments that have been made. Also to mention, obviously, the process of the ministerial statement has a little time to run, so all comments received will be embraced within the discussion process. But I'd now like to turn finally this afternoon to Argentina for an input.
Thank you very much. Marine litter and plastic pollution are a serious environmental issue which has ecosystem impacts, which has economic and social impacts, which requires international and national action. We appreciate the initiative taken and the endeavours undertaken by the governments of Ecuador, Germany, Vietnam and Ghana, and having convened this ministerial conference, which allows us at such an opportune moment to show commitments and to share visions on the approach and the way forward. Argentina understands that any strategy and any action in order to curb the issues of marine litter and plastic pollution need to be evidence-based and framed in a global vision of sustainable development across its three dimensions: economically, environmentally, and socially. Given the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, we feel that it is absolutely important to contextualize this framework. The ministerial statement, which is coming out of this conference, we acknowledge in the draft ministerial statement the important inputs which can be taken towards a future process. Equally, we also understand that any instrument or any international mechanism takes into account all the principles on the environment and the development, and to ensure that this historical asymmetry between countries in terms of development and national capabilities for developing countries is absolutely critical, that the common but differentiated responsibilities should be reflected in the draft ministerial statement. The experience of implementation of different multilateral agreements on the environment has shown that the level of ambition should be coherent with implementation measures that are available in this vein. Argentina would like to emphasize that we aspire towards a global instrument. We must also consider the provision of implementation measures from developed countries towards developing countries in terms of technical and financial assistance, capacity building, which will allow for a fair transition towards sustainable development. If not, we run the risk that global solutions, in order to address a real and urgent issue, will only serve to deepen the development divides between developed and developing countries, in particular those coasts who continue to, where plastic waste is washed up, and they continue to be impacted by environmental change. Argentina would like to walk towards constructive discussion in order to achieve an ambitious goal which is realistic yet balanced, and in the same vein, which looks at the discussions between intergovernments and the resumed session of UNEA 5.2 for the environment. Thank you very much.
Right at the end of time, but I just want to try and squeeze Norway back in. We didn't have you at the start. It would be great to have you just at the end of this afternoon. So with the permission of the interpreters, Maren Holsen, hopefully great to have you with us, and just to hear a comment coming from Norway.
Thank you, Peter. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, if you can put the video on as well, that would be great.
We're trying to, but something is wrong, and I think we just will not try again with the restart. So if you can hear me, that's the best. Excellencies, dear colleagues, first of all, I have to apologize for the technical problems, but I'm pleased to finally take the floor. People are expecting us to take bold action in the face of a mounting plastic pollution crisis. The demand for stronger measures to combat plastic pollution is heard all over the world.
I fear we are jinxed. I'm really sorry, Maren, we've lost the link to you and time is completely out. So we hope somehow to have a connection to you and to Norway at some point tomorrow. But many apologies, I don't know where the gremlin is. And I need to say we're right out of time now. Thank you so much for all those interventions which are going to be embraced in looking at the ministerial statement as a very positive force in favor of so much that is contained within it. We're going to meet at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to continue, and hope to continue with interventions as we have, first from member states, and then if we have time from other groups. So thank you very much. Could I just remind you that there is a reception probably from 5:30 onwards, and you have a little card courtesy of our wonderful Switzerland hosts please do join that. It's a great opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more personally, but don't get to know each other too personally because obviously we are still under COVID restrictions. And a reminder that if you may require a PCR test in order to return from Switzerland, we leave that within your thoughts. If I could thank all our contributors today, we have a full day tomorrow. Clearly, there is a very strong mood in the right direction on this ministerial conference. Any further comments, we hope to receive them and to have the opportunity to further discuss tomorrow morning, starting from 10 o'clock. So whether you were online in room S or in room W, thank you so much for your participation. And on behalf of the co-conveners, I wish you a very good evening, a safe night, and we will see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.